The Blackwood Manor School for Troubled Youth sat isolated deep in the mountains of Colorado, miles away from the nearest paved road. It was billed as an exclusive, high-end rehabilitation center for the children of the ultra-wealthy. Senators, CEOs, and foreign diplomats sent their problem children there to be fixed. But the local townsfolk in the valley below called it the Icebox. It was a fortress of gray stone and barbed wire, run by a man named Commander Kalen Thorne. Thorne was a disgraced former mercenary commander who ran the school not like an academy, but like a black site prison camp. Into this frozen hell arrived a woman who called herself Ilera. She was a hunched, elderly woman with gnarled, arthritic hands and a face wrinkled by decades of hard sun. She had been hired as the groundskeeper and greenhouse tender. Her job was to maintain the sprawling, frozen gardens in sub-zero temperatures, shovel the heavy snow from the long driveways, and grow the exotic flowers that Thorne liked to keep in his heated office. To Commander Thorne and his security staff, a dozen hulking brutes who had followed him from various war zones, Ilera was less than human. She was a piece of equipment that was slowly breaking down. Thorne took a sadistic pleasure in pushing her past her breaking point. He would watch from his office window, sipping expensive whiskey, as he ordered the guards to turn off the heating in her small gardener's shed in the middle of winter. He would intentionally drive his massive SUV over the flower beds she had spent weeks cultivating, laughing as he watched the old woman drop to her knees in the freezing mud to try and salvage the crushed petals. He called her the hag and mocked her weakness to the students, telling them that she was what happened when you were weak and useless in this world. He once forced her to dig a 6-foot hole in the frozen ground with a small hand trowel just because he didn't like the way she looked at him. When she finished, exhausted and bleeding, he kicked dirt into her face and told her it was good practice for her future. Ilera never cried. She never spoke back. She just wiped the frozen dirt from her eyes with trembling hands and limped back to her shed. But the hag was a lie constructed of titanium and shadows. Ilera was actually Agent Ilera Vance, a legend in the clandestine world, known only as the Wraith. She was the former head of the CIA's most secretive wet work division, a woman who had specialized in dismantling regimes and disappearing high-value targets in the most hostile environments on Earth. She had retired 10 years ago, but she had come to Blackwood for one reason. Her granddaughter, Mia, had been sent there by estranged parents, and her letters had suddenly stopped coming 3 months ago. Ilera wasn't there to garden. She was there to infiltrate, locate her granddaughter, and, if necessary, burn Blackwood Manor to the frozen ground. For 4 months, she had played the role of the feeble old woman, her arthritis a calculated act. Her greenhouse wasn't just for flowers. Beneath the potting soil, she had buried waterproof caches of high-grade tactical gear, encrypted communication devices, and specialized toxins she had distilled from the very plants she grew. The tension snapped on a brutal Wednesday night during a blizzard. Thorne was holding one of his infamous correction circles in the main hall. He had dragged Mia, who was barely 16, out of her bed. He accused her of trying to smuggle a letter out to the authorities. In front of the entire staff and student body, Thorne was preparing to use a heavy leather strap on the girl to teach her discipline. Ilera was outside, shoveling snow near the window. She saw Thorne raise the strap. She saw the terror in her granddaughter's eyes. The mission parameters instantly shifted from infiltration to immediate execution. Thorne raised his hand, soaking in the fear of the room. The heavy oak front doors of the manor suddenly exploded inward, shattered not by a bomb, but by a precise, high-impact breach that sent with splinters flying like shrapnel. The freezing wind and snow howled into the warm hall, and standing in the breach was not the hunched old gardener. Ilera stood tall, her posture radiating lethal military precision. She had discarded her rags for a sleek, thermal tactical suit she had hidden. In her hands, she didn't hold a shovel. She held a suppressed carbine rifle that was pointed directly at Thorne's chest. The room froze. Thorne, caught off guard, laughed nervously. "The gardener? You think you can stop me with a toy gun, old woman?" He signaled to his 2 largest guards, men who were twice Ilera's size, to break her. Ilera didn't speak. She moved, It wasn't the movement of an old woman. It was the blur of a master assassin who had kept her skills razor-sharp. As the first guard charged, she dropped low, sweeping his legs with a force that shattered his tibia. Before he hit the ground, she used his falling body as a shield against the second guard, firing 2 non-lethal suppressor rounds into his kneecaps with terrifying accuracy. Both giants were screaming on the floor in less than 3 seconds. "The hag is gone, Thorn," Elara said, her voice a cold, rhythmic monotone that echoed through the silent hall. "The wraith is here, and your class is dismissed." Thorn, realizing his mistake, grabbed Mia and put a pistol to her head, dragging her backward toward his fortified office. He screamed for his remaining 10 guards to kill the witch. He triggered the facility's lockdown, sealing the metal shutters over the windows and doors. He thought he had trapped her. He had no idea he had just locked himself in a cage with a predator. Elara didn't chase him immediately. She threw a smoke grenade, filling the great hall with a thick, blinding fog. She melted into the darkness. The guards were panicked, firing blindly into the smoke. Elara moved through them like a phantom. She didn't use her rifle. She used the environment she knew better than they did. She lured them near the greenhouse entrance, where she had rigged traps using the high-pressure irrigation hoses. A guard would step on a trigger plate and be hit with a blast of freezing water, instantly incapacitating him in the sub-zero air. Another was pulled into the shadows by a tripwire she had made from gardening twine, silenced by a precise nerve strike. She dismantled Thorn's private army one by one. They were terrified, whispering over their radios that the old woman was a ghost. By the time Elara reached the heavy steel door of Thorn's office, the manor was silent except for the howling wind outside. She didn't bother picking the lock. She placed a small, focused breaching charge made from fertilizer and accelerant on the hinges. The explosion was deafening, blowing the heavy door inward. Thorn was cowering behind his massive mahogany desk, still holding Mia, his face pale with sweat despite the cold. He looked up and saw Elara standing in the smoke, looking like an avenging angel of death. He tried to negotiate. He offered her money, millions from the parents of the students. He told her they could rule the school together. Elara walked forward slowly, her boots crunching on the debris. She looked at him with eyes that had seen empires fall. "You made me dig a grave in the frozen dirt, Thorn," she whispered. "You told me it was practice. You were right, but it wasn't for me." Thorn tried to raise his gun to shoot Mia, his final act of spite. Elara didn't hesitate. She fired a single shot that struck Thorn's hand, obliterating his pistol. He screamed and fell back against the wall. Elara pulled Mia into her arms, checking her for injuries, whispering comforts in a voice that had returned to a grandmother's warmth. She then turned back to Thorn, who was whimpering on the floor. She didn't kill him. She dragged him by his collar out into the freezing night, to the very hole he had forced her to dig days earlier. She tossed him into the shallow, frozen earth. He screamed, begging for mercy, claiming he would freeze to death. Elara looked down at him. "The flowers need good soil to grow, Commander. You're finally going to make yourself useful." She left him there, trapped in the frozen mud, his cries swallowed by the blizzard. As morning broke, the storm cleared. Blackwood Manor was swarmed by FBI tactical teams and child protective services, alerted by a distress beacon Elara had triggered. The students were liberated, many weeping as they were led to safety. The guards were found zip-tied in the greenhouse, suffering from hypothermia and shock. Thorn was found half frozen in the garden, babbling about a demon grandmother. The authorities looked for the hero, the tactical genius who had single-handedly dismantled a heavily armed mercenary group. But the gardener was gone. Her shed was empty, save for a perfectly pruned winter rose sitting on the windowsill. Elara Vance and her granddaughter were already hundreds of miles away, driving toward a new life in a warm climate. To the world, she would always be just an old woman, overlooked and underestimated. And that was exactly how the Wraith liked it. If you enjoyed this story of justice and hidden power, hit that subscribe button to join our community and never miss a mission. We bring you the best underestimated hero stories every week. Thanks for watching.